And you're back on Right Now with Jim Daws on the Mojo 50 Radio Network. Your daily journal of news, politics, and culture from an America First perspective. Well, across this country, we've seen a breakdown in law and order as district attorneys with a leftist agenda refuse to charge rioters, looters, and arsonists and turn them back into the riots as fast as police can arrest them. Couple this with a so-called bail reform movement that requires judges to release suspects that are charged, and you have a witch's brew of rising crime and chaos in America's cities. Recently, the National Conference of Chief Justices has weighed in support of a so-called risk assessment algorithm that would remove discretion from judges and keep dangerous criminals off the streets. To discuss this now, we're joined by Jeffrey Clayton. He's executive director of the American Bail Coalition, a trade group dedicated to defending the right to bail. You can find them online at ambailcoalition.org or on Twitter at ambailcoalition. Jeffrey, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
So it seems like all of these criminal justice reforms that we've seen, turning people out of jail before they've completed their sentences, releasing them without bail, and refusing these Soros-funded DAs refusing to charge them with obvious crimes has really caused a spike in lawlessness in America's cities. Tell the listeners what this Conference of Chief Justices is up to.
Well, they want to create a bail algorithm called a risk assessment algorithm that's going to presume release in pretty much all cases, and is going to never recommend that a defendant have to post bail. And none of these risk assessment algorithms do. Most of them are calibrated to favor release of what we would consider dangerous defendants based on their scoring system. And really, it's going to take away discretion from judges in individual cases and force the release of more what we would consider dangerous criminals.
You know, I was a private investigator for about 20 years, and I've testified in a lot of court cases, and the judges that I testified in front of seemed like that they would be very unlikely to relinquish the discretion to make rulings from the bench. Why is this group of chief justices weighing in to do just that?
Well, they thought this was a more fair system. They think it's a more fair system, but it's not. And the reality is that the judge that's closest to the case is going to make the right decision, and these are appellate justices that are presiding over huge court systems, and unfortunately, I would argue, dabbling too much into politics.
Why would a algorithm be less effective at determining who should be kept and who should be released than a judge's evaluation?
Well, what we've discovered is that these algorithms are not very accurate. The one in Colorado is only 58%. The best algorithm only predicts accurately 72% of the time. And what we've discovered is that even though it drives releases for many dangerous offenders, the ones that keeps in jail and unfortunately are minority defendants. So it has a double-edged sword where it actually releases more dangerous criminals, but also has a negative racial component to it as well.
So in the interest of criminal justice reform, they're actually headed down a road that will result in more inequities in the court system?
Yes, and what one leading professor from the University of Pennsylvania has said is that essentially they've baked bias into the system by using this, and there's no way really to get it out until we stop.
Who writes this algorithm, and what agenda do they have?
Well, the largest one in the nation is the Arnold Foundation. John Arnold, the former Enron billionaire, who's also donated $1.5 million to a campaign in California to force the statewide use of these risk assessment algorithms. And certainly there's a lot of Soros money in the various groups as well.
Can you cite any examples of where this algorithm system has failed to protect public safety?
Yeah, I mean, I think the largest study was the one in Kentucky that found that not only did it not decrease the jail populations, it actually increased crimes while on bail and increased failures to appear in court. And so it had a negative public safety impact. And in addition to all the wasted money that we spend and staff time to actually administer the thing, it produced actually negative results.
So this sounds like the worst of both worlds. It's keeping people in jail that wouldn't necessarily need to be kept in jail, and it's releasing people who are high risk to the community. Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, I think so. And it just builds in, assumptions we have about the criminal justice system rather than letting judges look at the criminal behavior in the past of each defendant and make a decision. And, and also to take out, the incentives of bail and private bail and all that sort of thing. And, bail recovery agents and all that, to take all that out of the systems also weakens accountability.
Well, that's an interesting aspect. If there's not a bondsman standing behind the recovery of this bail bond, then and these people are released from jail with no cash bail, who's going to be responsible for going out and rearresting these people if they don't show up for their court date?
Well, it'd be the police if they rearrest them, or they really just wait until they commit a new crime. And the other thing is, even when a bail agent is not involved, a third party is usually posting cash and they're on the hook. So even if I posted your bail, even if I didn't use a bail agent, I'm still going to want you to get to court because I don't want to forfeit the money. And
not only that, you're going to be in contact with the police to let them know where they can recover their defendant, I would imagine.
Exactly. In my case, I'm probably a co-conspirator, so I don't want to get arrested myself.
Right. So we have seen this bail reform movement spread like wildfire, especially in these blue states in California, Washington, Oregon, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Have we seen a corresponding increase in crime?
Absolutely, we have. I think
we're having a little bit of trouble with the connection here. Jeffrey, can you still hear me?
I can.
Answer that question again, if you would.
I think the example of New York is the one. The police commissioner said that bail reform is increasing crime. And I think, just for your average listener, the idea that a deputy chief of police could be clashing with rioters, he takes a punch to the face and is bleeding, and his picture's on every major national newspaper, and the person who threw the punch gets out on a zero bail signature bond. Well, I think that tells you everything you need to know.
I mean, that's an outrageous crime, and for sure. But we've seen murders and rapes and violent assaults result from people that have been released without any cash bail. Especially, I've taken note in Washington, where one of the rioters that had been arrested with a handgun at one of these events was released without bail and ended up stabbing to death 2 people. So is this whole effort designed by the chief justices in order to try to relieve them from responsibility? We know that in a lot of states, judges are elected officials, and whenever they're challenged, their opponents usually cite instances where these justices have released people back onto the streets with dire results. Is this an effort by the judges to try to shirk their responsibility to make their own determinations?
I think so. I mean, it just allows judges to pass the buck and not own the decision. And a judge I used to work for said it's a security blanket, and it helps you avoid, the actual decision and owning it, unfortunately. And you can always say it's somebody else's fault. It's the system's fault. And so I think that's a bad move for that reason.
Blame it on the algorithm.
Exactly. It's the algorithm's fault.
It's the algorithm's fault. So where do we stand on this bail reform movement? Is this going to be something that continues to spread and infect the justice system? Is it limited to mostly Democrat-run jurisdictions, or is this something that is getting entrenched and is going to lead to increased crime nationwide?
It's getting entrenched, and I think, even in what we would consider conservative states like Missouri and Iowa and others have had bail reforms coming and going. So I think it's going to be a continuing conversation. I think, particularly if, Biden is elected president, he is committed to ending cash bail and ending bail entirely and going to this new New York style system. So, the election's going to depend on it, and what happens after. I think we're going to see another push for bail reform.
Is this algorithm going to be applied to crimes across the board, or just low-level crimes, or people that pass through this algorithm screening who have been charged with murder or other serious crimes? Going to be is this algorithm going to judge them as well?
Yes, and that's, the goal is to have everybody assessed by one of these algorithms.
I mean, one of the obvious glaring examples you could imagine is these very wealthy offenders who have committed financial frauds or murder, or in the case of Jeffrey Epstein, a sex trafficking ring. They would probably look pretty good to that algorithm. They've got good credit. They've got stable addresses. They, before they came to the attention of the criminal justice system, they would have been considered model citizens.
Right, low risk signature bond, I think, and there's been hilarious examples of, I believe, Ted Bundy was low risk, and you can kind of just get to the extreme on this, and at a certain point, it just doesn't make any sense.
Ted Bundy would have been judged favorably by this algorithm.
That's right.
Unbelievable. So, where is your group in fighting this effort? Is there anything the listeners can do to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to see where your candidates are on bail reform and understand what it's going to mean for your community, and then go to our website and learn all about it. ambailcoalition.org.
So, what should they be supporting with regard to bail reform? I mean, this seems like a fairly complicated issue for the average voter to try to wade through. What should the bullet point be as far as a candidate's position on bail reform?
Well, I think they should be with where the president's position is, which is be against the Biden end cash bail movement, and for judges in criminal cases as they see appropriate.
Gotcha. Jeffrey J. Clayton, he's the executive director of the American Bail Coalition. They're defending your right to bail, and you can find them online at ambailcoalition.org. That's ambailcoalition.org, or you can find them on Twitter at ambailcoalition. Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.